Hello and welcome to Legally Consumed, a consumer products podcast by a consumer products law firm in Australia. I'm Raph Goldenberg, and I'm joined by co-hosts Kaye and Will McMinn, who are members of the team at CIE Legal.
We chat with executives of consumer products companies, their legal teams, and industry experts who give us a peek into their journeys as people. We explore industry-changing ideas and even share tips and tricks on how to navigate the consumer products space.
This season, we will feature guests from the automotive, retail, advertising and insights, food, beverage, and primary production and franchising sectors.
Welcome everyone to Legally Consumed. Today our special guest is Craig Douglas. Craig is the owner and founder of Nationwide Research. Hosting today's episode with me is Kaye. Nationwide helps consumer product companies stop people ripping off their brands. And I've had the honour and pleasure of working with Craig for around 20 years, and I know from personal experience what a fascinating job he has, and it's a great privilege to have him with us today. So, welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Raph. Good to be here.
Craig, we're going to start today by asking some getting to know you questions, just to introduce yourself. I just wanted to get a sense of your career journey. How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Well, my journey starts back in the Olympic Games in Melbourne, where my father was the head of security and did that coming out of military intelligence, and post that needed a job and started up as an investigator. He was the first investigator in Victoria, the first licensed investigator in Victoria in 1957, and he ran his business until the late 1970s, early 1980s when I joined him, and it was something that I was going to do. I'd sort of learned the trade as I grew up. You know, he used to take me out and we'd do some things in the field, and I joined him, and having come out of school, and it was one of those things where I thought, this will be good for 5 years, and I'll do this for a while, and 40-something years later, I'm still here doing it. So that's where I came from. That's how I became an investigator, and in fact, as it's the only job I've ever had, because I joined it out of the school. So my wife makes a comment about how lucky I am having never been to a job interview, but as I point out to her, every time I go and see a new client, it's like a job interview. So, so that's my history.
It must be hard to be incognito after 40 years doing it.
Well, it used to be, obviously, when we were on the road all the time, and you'd go and see people, and they would remember you, and they could say, "Hang on a sec, you're the guy that was here last week.
Here he comes."
But now, of course, with the telephones and the systems, and what you can do, and you can on a good telephone call, you can be pretty much anybody, as long as you can back it up with some facts, and then you sound like the right person and stuff. So yeah, it's and I must admit that over the years when we first started, that certainly the first 10 to 15 years of my investigator's life was insurance, government, a lot of that sort of work where you were on the road. And then post that, sort of in the mid-90s, things became more corporate, and there was less on the road and more at the desk. So, and that's, pretty much now, the bulk of which we do, we would do it from the desk. So.
And the consumer products connection, because we wouldn't have you on this podcast unless there was a connection to consumer products. So I know we're going to talk about some of this stuff in a bit more detail, but that's a big part of what you do, isn't it?
Well, the problem with consumer products is that something is good is always copied, or somebody tries to earn $1 off it through inappropriate signage, or they try and connect to something that's good or popular. And of course the brands take offence to that. So they go to their lawyers and they say, we've heard this guy's doing this, or someone's selling a product, or someone's got a sign up that says that they're connected or authorised. And of course, you guys, the lawyers, never leave your office. So you ring guys like me, and then I go out, we go and have a look, and we come back with what is the evidence, because your response to the client is, if I can't prove it, you can't take an action. You need the evidence. So our job is to actually get the evidence, to go out there. What does the sign say? What is it? What are they saying? And sometimes it's not just the sign on the front of the building. It's when you go in and they hand you a business card and the logo's on the business card and they say, we're authorised to do this, and, we can fix your computer or fix your car, or, we've got the authority to do all these things, which they don't have. But it's obviously concerning to the brand owner, and it's confusing to the consumer. So our role is the evidence gatherer, is our role.
Mm. And can you tell us a little bit more about the types of problems that these companies get you to help with? So how do they usually approach you?
Initially, it was always through their lawyers. They'd go to their lawyers and say, we've got a problem, and we would get contacted that way. But in a lot of cases now, they come directly to us. So we would, we talk to them about their issues, and we talk to them about what solutions we can bring to the table. And sometimes we can certainly value add with a lot of the things we do. But, we have to go out and find the evidence and find the problems, and then work out what the solution is. And sometimes, the problem that's in the field, there isn't a simple solution, and that's where it's a very good triangular relationship with us and the brand owners and the lawyers. That it works best for us. So
there's a strategy component to it as well.
There's always a strategy, and the strategy, there's the overriding part of the strategy is a budget. Sometimes it's just like, it's no good spending, $10,000 to cure a $5 problem. So they'll come with an issue, and we'll talk about strategies, and we'll talk about budgets and a plan to solve that problem, but also to ensure the problem doesn't come back. Because it's no, you go there and you solve the problem or serve a document, and everybody walks away and says, oh, great, it's done, it's finished, and we tick that box and move on. And then a couple of weeks later, they say, we're now missing out on income, and, why do we stop? And then they just, well, he's not around anymore, and they restart again. So sometimes the strategy is not just to find the problem and solve the problem, it is to ensure the problem stays away. And the other issue, of course, is if someone sees somebody doing something, let's take a market seller that's selling fake handbags, and the guy's selling lots of handbags, and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of money coming across the till. The guy next door says, well, I'm selling things that are nondescript or without a brand, or, that doesn't have that doesn't draw the traffic in. He says, well, why am I selling all these handbags which aren't selling? I'm going to start that as well. So if you don't address the first issue, you end up with multiple issues, because people see it as, well, they're not stopping that guy doing it, so I'll start as well. So
yeah, other people are doing it, so why don't I?
That happens a lot.
Yeah. So it seems like every product gets counterfeited. So what are some of the more memorable counterfeits that you've seen in your line of work?
When you say every product, it's interesting, because no one ever counterfeits something from, say, Target or Kmart or, the cheap product, because when you produce a counterfeit product, it's no good producing the same product at the same price. Because why would you buy it from a dodgy seller if you weren't getting a deal? So in a lot of cases, the products that do get counterfeited are the more expensive versions. They're the ones that, where there's a financial room to get underneath it and sell a cheaper version. So different types of products. Well, Raph and I have experience with automotive products, and there's a lot of automotive products out there that are concerning. I have a client some years ago who was importing and selling fish sauce out of Asia, and he was concerned that he had a brand name on the sauce, and it was very good and desirable, and other people were branding their product using his name. So he actually had to address that issue. So it can be, everybody talks about counterfeit products as being, hats, caps, jackets, handbags, all those things that we always see at the markets. The counterfeit products can be anything. If you can make $1 out of it, people will find a way to copy it and sell it. I had a client who used to sell, they were the GPS units for underwater. So that's where they were, if there was selvage and they had to pinpoint a spot underwater. And normal GPS doesn't work. So they had a special GPS unit for underwater selvage and, for oil exploration and those sorts of things. And he kept getting all these ones back saying that this is terrible, or it doesn't work, and it's not accurate. And he couldn't work out why until he pulled one apart and found out that it actually wasn't his product, that it was in his casing and his box and his branding and everything was his, until he actually got to the guts of the item and found out that it wasn't actually his product. And so somebody had copied the packaging, but put a cheap version in it that didn't work properly. So, but the problem with that is it has an impact on his product because it's his branding. So that's always the issue. And that's why the brand owners do something, because it's detrimental to the value, that brand value of their product when someone puts a dodgy version in the marketplace.
Craig, I remember going out and doing some training about counterfeit products to customs with you, and one of the things that I always remember was the Corona beer.
Yes.
And the point that you made was that in the middle of the night in a nightclub, when you order a Corona, are you really noticing the difference on the bottle or things like that? And one of the funnier images, I think, the concerning image that you showed, was there were all these bottles of Corona that had been seized and had come into the country, and one of them, you lifted the bottle out of the box, and it was closed, sealed, but there was like a rotten lemon on the inside of the bottle. So, because people,
Wow.
so what's happening is this is a bottle that has been previously used with the lemon gets popped into the Corona, and then the bottles get sent back overseas. They get filled up with counterfeit beer and recapped and supplied out. And so, unless the lemon one's pretty obvious, but there are little things like some of them weren't, the fill levels were slightly different. And as you say, if you order it,
Well, it wasn't, and it wasn't just that. So what you were saying was a genuine bottle with non-genuine beer.
Yep.
And because it's a glass bottle, and because the label is actually printed onto the bottle, as opposed to most beers where the label is,
Yep.
it's a paper stick-on label.
Yeah.
The bottle can be reused. So the empty bottle has a value. And what would happen is that, they would collect a lot of these empty bottles, and then would go and get refilled with a beer, it tastes like Corona beer, and recap or not, and they'd recap it, put it in a six-pack, and then send it down, and it would, we'd go through the pubs and clubs. They said, and again, as you said, that's a bit hard at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, and in a dark pub, and someone gives you a bottle, and you drink it, and you're not realising that you may have a genuine bottle, but you don't have genuine beer. There was also a version out called, Corona was the genuine, but there was Serono, which was in an identical trade dress bottle, all the same labelling and everything, but the name had changed. And it was a beer, their version was a Chinese beer, and that was being sold as well. But again, you wouldn't know. And not only would you know, half the time you get it if you're at someone's place, you put it in a stubby holder. So you cover all those things anyway. So, that was, and again, that was great work by Customs, or Australian Border Forces, they're now known as, to stop that. There was lots of containers of stuff that got stopped, which was great. Great result, because that's not the stuff you want in the marketplace.
No, I wouldn't even have thought that would be a possibility. Wow.
Some of the photos are pretty horrifying. So, Craig, one of the other things I know that you do, apart from you're out in the markets, or you've got your teams out in the markets identifying counterfeit products for clients, but you're also at events. I remember I once was contracted into you as an investigator at an AC/DC concert, where I was told to stand in a particular position and look out for people selling, as outside before the concert started, in return for actually being able to get into the concert afterwards. I didn't see anyone, but I saw a whole bunch of people walking around with black T-shirts and headsets, looking very serious, which I think was your team. So can you shed a bit of light on what are you guys doing in that space? What are you looking out for?
In that case,
what do those engagements look like?
It was a band in that case, obviously, and we've done multiple bands over the years, and a lot of them are normally the older of the bands who travel for and give concerts to sell back catalogue or merchandise. It's they're not having released new albums, so they're looking for that sort of income stream, and a good concert you would expect to get somewhere between $15 and $20 per patron in merchandise sales. So, for everyone that spends nothing, someone spends $50. A T-shirt, a genuine AC/DC T-shirt, and this was $50.
This was at whatever it's called now, but Etihad stadiums.
Yeah, down there. And so they had 50, 60,000 people there, And they did 3 nights in a row, or 3 nights over 5 nights down there. And so if you're looking at on average, to say 50,000 people and $20 per person, there's $1 million worth of income that comes from merchandise sales. So they per concert. And now that's split up. The band gets some of it. The provider of the gear gets some. The local concession seller gets some, and there's another party that gets a little bit as well. So the band gets half of that. And that's an income stream they get every night they play, which is one of the reasons why they come and do these tours. And so what we do in our role is to try and stop the bootleggers, the people that travel with the band or travel at the same time the band travels, and comes and brings their own version of the product and stands there before the concert and after the concert and says, here's a T-shirt and you can buy it for $20.
So how can you deal with them on the night? So just talk me through what that looks like.
Well, it depends on where you're working. Sometimes, as an example, Olympic Park in Sydney have special rules in that area. A bit like the Grand Prix has a declared area, and so there's actually special rules that relate to that area. So Olympic Park in Sydney is a bit different. They've got their own security, and we just work with them and point out with them, and they come and take the action. Someone like Etihad, or Marvel as it's called now, is we pretty much say you can't stand here or there or there. We move them away from where the genuine selling outlets are, and we try to keep them far enough away, and we try to encourage them before the event to not sell merchandise. In a lot of cases, these sellers will sell tickets before. So they do scalping of tickets. So they have a sign up saying tickets wanted, and someone will turn up and say, Raph was coming and he didn't come in the end, and he said, just sell him a ticket and get whatever you want for it. So they'll buy your ticket for $50, and then they run to the gate and they sell it for $100. So in a lot of cases, and it's always under ticket value, so they're not breaking any rules. So in a lot of cases, they do that before the event, but they will sell their merchandise after the event. And it's not unusual for a guy to sell 200 or 300 T-shirts post the event. So he could, and it's all cash, straight in the pocket, and we try and move them away from the area. And what you were doing was watching to see if anyone sets up. And you can always tell, because it's like, there's a sea of people moving, and then all of a sudden you can see that something's happening. There's like they walk around a pole, and you can see that there's that reason why the crowd stopped. And it's normally because someone's thrown a bag on the ground and said, T-shirts, $20 each, and people are grabbing them and buying them. And so we would go along and say, hey, you can't sell from here, move up. Now, we would expect the bylaws officers to come along and say, you can't do that. But at 11 o'clock at night, they not very often do they come along. You take the MCG as an example. We just did Man United's tour when they were here in July, trying to stop the bootleggers and the backpackers selling. And they have big problems. In fact, I remember doing it in 1999. This is how long I've been doing this stuff for. And there was a guy there selling product at MCG. That was on the Thursday night. On the Saturday night, they were playing up at Homebush in Sydney. It was the opening event. It was the test event before the Sydney Olympics. And so, I was when David Beckham played for them, and they went. So we end up going to Sydney. And who should I meet in Sydney but the same guys that we met in Melbourne? Because what had happened in Melbourne, the Melbourne City Council bylaws officers came along. They were selling without a permit, so nothing to do with intellectual property. They didn't have a permit to sell, and they treated the guy with the trumpets the same way as they treated the guy with the T-shirts. So they scooped up all their product and they took it to their office. And the next day they all went to Melbourne City Council. They paid their fines. They got all their stock back, and off to Sydney they go. And so we're chasing all the same product around in Sydney as we were chasing around in Melbourne. So, but in Sydney, the new rules, the rules of that area up there was better for us. But the guy that I met on that tour in 1999 that was selling product, I met him again in 2019 when Man United played in Perth, and we went over to do the same thing. And this guy turns up, and I said, "Are you still doing this?" And he said, "Well, you're still doing it." So he said, "Of course I'm still doing it." So, and his job was, he had a job, and his job was to follow Man United. Wherever it went in the world, Manchester United played so many games with EPL and so many games with the Champions League, etc. Wherever they played in the world, he went there, and he would sell his product and put money in his pocket and move on. So that's the sort of thing that guys do. That's what we were doing that night. It was just watching the people coming and going and seeing it was it. There's a very quick story. There was a guy up in Sydney where just before a concert finished, I think it might have been U2 that played there, and this guy walked across just before the concert finished with a great big, with one of those sort of colourful suitcase things that they, the $2 bags you buy. This guy, he lugged it across to the gate, and he stood at the outside gate, and I thought, well, that's all the T-shirts. They're ready for the out when they're going to sell these T-shirts. So I walked over and said to this guy, "You got my T-shirts?" And he said, yeah, it's $50 for me to deliver. So I gave this guy $50. He gave me the bag of T-shirts. He walked away, and I took the bag of T-shirts around the corner to the police compound and said, "Here, you guys mind these?" Went back to where there was, and there was these two blokes standing there looking at their watches and wondering where the hell the guy was with all the T-shirts. What they didn't realise, of course, is we'd already scooped them up, and they were around in the police compound. So, that's what we do. The events, and it's not just sporting events. It's anything where merchandise is sold. From Grand Prix to
the Wiggles.
To the wheel. Well, interestingly enough, do
the Wiggles get counterfeited?
Well, I think they do, but the highest sales per patron was when Hannah Montana came out. That was they told me that was the highest sales.
Yeah, because you got the kids yelling at the parents. I want one.
Just Kaye.
Yeah. And the parents gave in and buy them. So
yeah, I'm not surprised about that.
Yeah. So moving, I guess, to another side of the market, you mentioned before, the more expensive a product is, the more potential it is for it to be counterfeited. So how do you spot a fake?
I'd love to know.
What is that process? And I guess a question following on from that is, for these luxury brands, are these having a real impact on their sales, like the counterfeiting issue?
Let me answer the first question. Impact on sales there's an impact. Greater impact on sort of the brand value, as to you've got one of those handbags. Is it genuine or is it not? So you might have spent a lot of money, and then people think, oh, it's fake anyway. But if you're going to buy $100 fake, you're not going to go down to the designer shop and buy a $2,000 genuine. So actual impact on sales is lesser.
You weren't going to buy it anyway.
No,
that wasn't a sale.
You couldn't afford to buy it, so you go and bought the other one. So that answers that sort of question. But if it's not a $2,000 handbag, but it might be $200. They do have impacts, because people think they're getting a bargain. As long as it looks okay, they're not suspicious in any way. And it normally comes with a story. It's old stock. I didn't use it. I mean, how many times do you look at Marketplace and you see stuff being sold, and it's got, brand new with tags written beside it. So, who buys a pair of shoes and keeps the shoes and keeps the tag on them? So in a lot of cases, it's not genuine product. In a lot of cases, how do you tell? The three simple ways to tell is price, appearance, and location. So what's its price? Can I really buy that brand of handbag or that brand of T-shirt for that price? That should tell you a tale straight away. Appearance. What does it look like? Has it got all the right swing tags on it? Is it in the right bag? Does it appear correctly? Does it look like the way you would buy it if you went into the shop and bought it? And location. Where are you buying it from? If you're getting it from a guy outside of an event at 11 o'clock at night, there's a pretty good chance it's not genuine. We used to do a thing for a client where we were, a bit like what we did for you, where there was a contact number and people would ring us. And I remember this lady ringing one day and saying that her husband had given her a handbag, and she was a bit suspicious as to whether it was genuine or not. And I said to her, well, tell me, she said, would you like me to send it to you, or I can send you some photos? And I said, well, just before you do that, where did he buy it from and how much did he pay for it? And she said, he got it from the Queen Victoria Market and he paid $100. And I said, it's fake. And she says, how do you know? You haven't even seen it yet. I said, well, it's because it would never be genuine because of where it came from.
In that case, you should have just told her it was just to keep peace in the marriage.
Yes, I think that might have caused a problem, but things. So sometimes sometimes people believe what they're getting is genuine. It depends if it comes through separate hands. So see, we talk about automotive. You as a consumer don't go and buy parts for your car. Your mechanic does.
Yeah, and they put them in the car, and you don't see them before they go in.
You don't see where they're coming from. You don't see the location they're coming from. You don't see their appearance of their boxes, and you don't see what their price is. So sometimes the consumer gets fooled if there's a third party in the middle.
I remember seeing holograms on a counterfeit product. So they have these holograms that are designed to, make clear that they're the genuine product, but then people start copying the holograms. Seems like there's people will find a way to work around.
Well, you knew what a genuine was because you knew what the hologram should have looked like.
Yeah.
But as long as someone goes, oh, it's genuine because it's got a hologram on it, well, it could be a fake version. You don't know unless you got comparison with the genuine.
Yep.
Or you know what the genuine should look like. It moves, it's a hologram, it's got colours and it moves, I must be genuine. So a lot of people can convince themselves it is genuine, because I want this product to be genuine, so it's got a hologram on it, I'm convinced.
So we've talked a lot about products and how they're often counterfeited. So I'd like to talk a little bit about website domains because there's also a lot of value in that as well. Could you tell us a couple of stories of the lengths that brands have gone to protect their domains and get their domains back from cyber squatters?
One of the problems with domains is that there's so many versions of them around now, and even just recently with the .aus being released. And so a brand says, well, how wide do I go? I mean, how do I protect everything? I know that Ugg boots is an example. There's probably 1,000 domains pulled down every month that has the word Ugg in it, specialuggsforsale.com or discountuggsoverhere.com. So that they're very proactive in doing that. But in a lot of cases, especially in Australia with the domains, the second level domain, the .com.aus, one of the issues is that you're supposed to have support for it when you register it. A domain name or a trademark or an acronym of your name, or, there's a level of support you're supposed to have, which is where you get a lot of business names registered, and then the domain name gets registered after that. And we chased one guy, and his domain name was rangerover.com.au. But when you put it all together, it was rangerover.com.au. But as far as he was concerned, it was Range Rover.
I remember one matter we worked on together not that long ago where we had a brand that will remain nameless that was coming into Australia, a global brand, and I think it was the company name or the business name there was the business name they needed to operate under was taken, and in that case it wasn't someone doing the wrong thing. It was if you can imagine that we did a company search and the business name was a combination of the two directors' surnames and just happened to be
what's your client?
Yeah, and so then the client. So we sort of said to the client, well, how important is this? And they said, well, it's this much important to us. And then out of the blue, this person who's just got this business name like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take them.
I worked with a client who wanted to rebrand and change their name, shorten their name. They had two names and they wanted to shorten their name because it looked better on signage, etc. And the guy that had that name was a company name, proprietary limited name, and he had it. It was a small operation that was running out of Renmark, and it happened to be his name. So his surname. So I contacted him and said, I've got a deal. If you're willing to change the company name, and we'll do the paperwork so we can scoop it up on the way through, I'll pay you an amount of money. I had to fly to Adelaide, meet him at Adelaide Airport to hand the bank check over before he actually believed what I was telling him to do. So I met him at Adelaide Airport. He came there with his wife and his young children, and we met there. I handed a rather large bank check over him. We signed all the paperwork, and he was thankful. He was hugging me. His wife was crying. This was money for nothing. And all he did was he took the company name and added and Sons to the company name. So he was able to keep his company name just by adding and Sons to the back of it. And our client got the name, and they continue to trade under that name today. So
the most famous example of that is Nissan. So Nissan.com is is owned by a man in the US whose surname is Nissan. He's of Israeli origin. And before, he had a business, Nissan Computers or something like that. And so he legitimately registered it because that was his business name. And then, this is early in the domain cycle. And I think that Nissan came in and they tried to, throw their legal weight around it. And in the end, they sued him. It went all the way to the US Supreme Court because this guy wasn't interested in being paid off. He's like, this is my name, I'm entitled to use it. And I think he won in the Supreme Court and is still the holder of that domain name. If you go to that website, there's this whole story is on the website. So, anyway.
Is he still trading under that name, or he's just holding it out?
I can't recall if he's still trading, but I think he was offered. I imagine he was offered a huge amount of money to give it up. But if you go to Nissan, it's like Nissan.co or something. I don't. So because it's not held by Nissan.
Look, I've paid more than $250,000 to buy something from
for a client.
And it's an out of the blue approach.
Yeah.
And people don't believe it. They say, "Oh, come on." Yes. I said, "No, it's true."
It's such a big part of your brand now, the website.
They don't believe it. So there's always that argument over branding. And in fact, there's an argument ongoing now with .au because when they released that, they said, and it was back in 2018, they said they were going to do it. And so anybody that had a .com.au, .net.au or .org.au at the time had an entitlement to .au, to the top level domain. And in fact, in my case, with my company, Nationwide Research, I automatically got the .au because no one else had the other two. But for other names, if you had more than one company with an entitlement, you've now got a bit of a standoff until somebody pulls out. And so there's some negotiations going on. There's some money flying around. I'll pay you so much to withdraw your entitlement so I can get the .au. Because the top level domain it's not as easier, but you get a much better result when people Google search you as opposed to a second level domain. So it is worth.
It's worth money.
Companies chasing them. So yeah.
Craig, my next question is: there's obviously some links between organised crime and counterfeiting, and I can imagine there might have been some scenarios where you're dealing with people who are slightly dodgy, slightly scary. So my question is, have you ever been scared in your work? And do you have any interesting stories?
Well, most of the scary things I have to deal with is dealing with the lawyers. They're the scariest people. So most of the people that do what they do in the marketplace do it for money. So they're not doing it because they're wedded to a brand. They do it because they can make money out of the brand. So in a lot of cases, no, it's not. And because keep in mind, in Australia, we're not manufacturers, we're sellers. So that's just, they pick product up out of Asia and they're selling it here. And, today they'll sell this brand watch and tomorrow they'll sell that brand watch. And if you set up a stall in Collins Street and put 4 different brands of sunglasses down at $20 each by the end of lunchtime, you would have sold them all. But if someone came along and said, "I'll stop selling that brand, just replace it with another brand," and they'll sell it. They're not wedded to a particular brand. I've only ever had one incident of concern. We did an Anton Pillar raid for a large soft drink company, and because someone was producing a counterfeit version of soft drink. You said before about weird products get counterfeited. Well, they were counterfeiting soft drink. Well, they counterfeit beer, so why not soft drink? And we did this Anton Pillar raid, and the guy was not happy about us entering his place of business, which was his sort of back of his home, and I was there standing there with the lawyer, and she was explaining the documentation and what he had to do. And the guy said, "Just hang on a second." He went into the back room and he came back and he had a rifle under his arm. And he said, "I think it's time for you to leave." And I turned to look at the lawyer to say, "I think he's right." And the lawyer had already gone. She'd already gone out the door, and I decided, well, maybe I should leave as well. So, and I was wearing a microphone because our guys outside obviously listened to what's going on, and I made a copy. "Yeah, you should put that gun down." And within 5 minutes, they're on the phone to the local police. The police turned up and wanted to arrest her. They did a search of the property, found 3 or 4 guns, and wanted to arrest this guy and take him away. And we're saying, "You can't take him away.
We just want our counterfeit products.
We need him here to be able to help us through this issue of the Anton Pillar raid." So they said, "All right, well, we'll hang around with you." So that's the only time that anyone's ever really challenged me. And there's not a lot of danger to what we do, and even less now that we're doing it from the desk as opposed to face-to-face. So
I do remember in a former life going to a place where there was there'd been a custom seizure of a certain product, and you and I went to get the importer to sign some sort of deed or letter where a forfeiture notice to forfeit his counterfeit goods, and there was a tall, foreboding gentleman sort of standing looking over us the whole time, and I was sort of happy just to get out of there with the document.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people, when they invest money, and I think there was about 4,000 products that time that we did that. So the guy had a serious investment, and you're asking him to sign a document that said, I will forfeit all these goods, which meant that it was goodbye to the 4,000 products that A, he had spent money to get and ship into Australia, and B, he wasn't going to be selling and making the money he thought he was going to sell it. So I think that in that situation, he felt that maybe you could scare us away and make us go away and rethink the situation, But
then he saw me, and and he just got so scared that he just caved in.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
That's exactly
nothing
what
to do with
happened, for
Craig.
sure.
Well,
I just hid behind Craig.
but I was smaller than the other guy. He was bigger than all of us. But I think from memory, the guy signed it, and that was interesting. It was an importer that was a small little trader that had it was automotive product, and he had 4,000 items which were dodgy, and they were brake pads and connecting belts and all these things that you just didn't want put in cars, and we knew he wasn't selling them. There was no way he was ever going to sell those from that location. So he was the front man for someone else, and he would never put the money up to buy it anyway. But his name was on the import, so he had to sign the forfeit notice, and of course he had someone behind him leaning on him, probably saying, the minute you sign that, I lose all my money. So it was an interesting situation. Yeah, it was. It was one of those things where we could always walk away. It's not worth dying over, a dodgy brake pad or something. But and I say that to my people when they go out to do this sort of work. It's it's a hat or a cap, a t-shirt, a handbag. It's not worth losing an eye over the fact that someone's going to get all nasty. You just walk away. You can always come back tomorrow. So. The lawyers don't pay us enough money to put our life at risk. So
you mentioned earlier that businesses in Australia usually are the sellers. They get products from overseas. They're rarely the manufacturer. So what kind of role does Australia Border Force play in anti-counterfeiting measures for goods coming from overseas? And how do brands work with Customs or Australian Border Force to protect their brand?
Well, ABF are very good at stopping product. They'll only stop sort of 2 or 3% of the product that comes in, but when you factor in the stuff that's coming in for known importers that will never be fake, you're down to that sort of that last level of product coming from dodgy places, maybe misdescribed, or maybe coming from a supplier they know of from previous shipments, or to an importer that's done it before. And you got to remember too that with the way Australian law is, we can't ask the state police to help because it's not a state issue, it's a federal issue. So the only way you can remove a counterfeit product, there's only 3 ways you can remove a counterfeit product from the marketplace. So one is Border Force stops it on the way through. 2 is you get the federal police to come along and do something, and that doesn't happen very often. And the 3rd way is that they're willing to give it up on the basis of a document that Raph or someone else gives us, so we can go out there and say, look, on the basis of this potential legal action, you should forfeit the product. So they're the only 3 ways. So if you can get Border Force to stop it on the way through, then that's the best way to stop it, because they've got they've got skills to find it. They've got some law that supports them, and now with the laws since their change about 10 years ago, the onus has moved from the brand owner to the importer. So I do a lot of work for a couple of sporting companies, and I'm the contact point for the documentation that comes from Border Force. So I get all the seizure notices, and we will get 3 or 4 a week, and some of them will be 2 or 3. And you think, why would they stop 2 or 3 pairs of running shoes? And it's because they've opened a box and there's 100 in there, and 98 are that brand and 2 are this brand. So they seize everything. They know they're fake. So the number of people, I think in all the work I've done for this brand, only one person has put in a request for release. who said, no, I wish them to be released, which they can do. They have the right to put in a request, at which point of time the brand has to commence some form of legal action and injunct Border Force from releasing the product. They've got 10 working days to do that. And that's an expensive exercise to do. You've got to go to federal court and get that injunction. So in most cases, I would say in 80% of the cases, after the product is seized, we hear nothing from the importer. They just, 10 days goes by and it automatically gets forfeited if they don't do anything for 10 days. So the art here is to make certain that Border Force stops all the product. So how do you do that? Well, they haven't had it for a couple of years because of COVID reasons, but they do training. So we'll set up a little roadshow and we'll go out to the 4 locations and take the product and sing our song 10 times as they all come past. And you'll get 50, 60 agents from Melbourne, similar numbers in Sydney and maybe slightly less in Brisbane and in Cairns. But they'll come past and they'll have a look at the product and go, we've seen that product come through. But we're not quite certain how to tell genuine from non-genuine. So we'll show them, but we'll also put on their database. The ABF database has an area where the brands can actually upload product, images, details, and we can also lodge a document which says we're concerned with this seller or this supplier. So they will watch for those people as importer or shippers. So
yeah, and I remember when we worked on this sort of stuff at Toyota, it's pretty clear that customs they've got limited resources. So if a brand puts in a big effort in training them, turning up, showing them the difference, they do become familiar and they're probably more inclined to look out for those products because, and I remember, showing them the packaging of the oil filter and the G in genuine was different in the counterfeit versus the G in genuine in the genuine product. And so after a while, they start noticing these things, and I think the more effort you put in, the more likely they're going to look out for your product. That's an anecdotal thing, but they certainly appreciate the brands turning up and putting in an effort, because otherwise there's just so much. They're opening so many things, so they need some.
The biggest problem is getting the brands to register in the first place, because someone has to own the program. Yeah, which is where we come in. We do that for a number of brands. They'll get their lawyers to register, and it's free to register. Other than the lawyers' fees, it's free to register. So that's easy to do. It gets renewed every 4 years, so that's not a big issue. It's not coming around every 5 minutes. And
you got to sign a deed saying that if there's a seizure amongst us above a certain amount, that you'll cover the costs. Of holding it or whatever.
Yeah, storage and or destruction. But I think last year, they only issued like 3 or 4 invoices last year.
Yeah,
They very rarely is it a money making venture for them. And so we get, or you, the lawyers, will get the notification, and then you work out whether you need to do anything about it. But it's a very good way of stopping product coming in. It's also a deterrent, because on their website you can actually go in and search. Okay, I want to bring in Raph shoes, and you go in there and you go, well, he hasn't registered, so I can bring them in. And I was told the other day of a supplier, local supplier that sells into all these markets, had bought in 2 40-foot shipping containers of a particular brand. And he'd rung ABF and said, is it registered? And they said, no, but it might get registered tomorrow. But it's not registered now. Okay, so can I bring it in? So if you bring it in, we can't stop it. And it was full of counterfeits.
Yeah.
Now, the brands know they should register. And there's no impediment to registering.
Yeah, it's not a very well-known program, is my impression. Like, you talk to a lot of people that never realise it exists. It's sort of a bit similar to the some of these online marketplace programs like Zero. You can register your brand with eBay, and if there's a counterfeit product, they actually can help identify it. Not many people know about that,
and so that's why they come to us, and then also the lawyers too.
Yeah.
And there are lawyers that do intellectual property, but there are lawyers that do brand protection, and it is different. Trademark registration and brand protection is quite different. So they'll come to us, and we'll say to them, look, we can help you in the field, but the first thing you can do is help yourself. Lodge this and get this running, because this is the best way to stop. It's a deterrent. It's an online deterrent. I'm not bringing that in because I might lose it. So it's a very good way of running it. And a lot of the brands do it. But it's amazing every 4 years when they come up for renewal that they get about 30% drop off. every 4 years.
Yeah,
For
wow.
some reason, they just don't renew them. So,
And then I think the other element is they've got the legal side and so you have a success and you seize the product, but then make it known, put out a press release or something of these things, because then if it's in the newspaper, it means some of these people who might be thinking about counterfeiting your brand go, okay, well, so-and-so is looking out. They're having people confiscate the product.
is it that then tells the public that there is a counterfeit version of that product out
That's
there?
true.
And
That's
how did you let that happen? And
Yeah.
what? And did I buy a counterfeit as opposed to
Yes,
a
it's a
genuine?
fine balance.
So there is a balance there. Some brands do it.
Yeah.
They really advertise and market their successes.
Yeah.
And others just like to keep it quiet, and for good reason too. So
that's all about counterfeit products, but it is pretty common as well for genuine products to make their way into Australia through unauthorized channels.
parallel imported product. There's plenty of it out there.
Yeah.
And we're an affluent country, so we have a higher selling point than a lot of other places around the world. I have a couple of clients that produce products at different levels, so different quality products, and it's built to a dollar figure for the regions. So we would get the top level here, but other places around the world would get a lesser level, genuine product, but it's a lesser level. It's a lesser quality product, and they will get imported, and you can't stop them because it's genuine. It's not for Australian market, but it's a genuine product. So they come in, they come through customs. Customs might look at it and say, well, it's coming from a genuine supplier. They'll let it through, and then they hit the marketplace. But that's where it gets down to consumers. The consumers got to look at the product and work out whether it is an Australian product or a product that's been brought in for sales in Australia. A lot of parallel products sold in Australia. A lot of retail outlets that survive.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of legitimate businesses like me that are based on their business model based on parallel imports of well-known brands.
And it gets back to the price they're selling the product for locally. So one of the ones I see a lot of is Finnish dishwashing tablets. It's everybody's selling them, but we have a different water quality here in Australia that they do in other places around the world. So the product performs differently because we have the water is not as hard as it is in some places. So but people will buy it, and it's a genuine product, but it may not perform to the level that you expect it. And then what happens is that they ring this is a terrible product. They ring the local company and they say, oh, your product's terrible. And they say, where did you buy it from? I said, oh, we bought it from this place down the road. I said, well, it's ours, but it isn't ours. It's not an Australian product. It's a genuine product, but for an overseas market. So consumer, buyer beware. Consumers have got to be realise that there are other products out there that sell in Australia that are genuine, but they're not at the Australian level than we expect that they would be. So,
Is there anything that an Australian authorised seller of the product can do to, I guess, help prevent parallel imports?
they can own the trademark, which would be a good start. But if you're a wholly owned subsidiary of an overseas company, that overseas company is not going to transfer the ownership of the trademark to the Australian entity, even though they own the Australian entity. That would be a way, because then they could register as the trademark owner. So the product is not being imported with the consent of the trademark owner. So there is ways, but there's no magic bullet in that situation, and you can't price it. Well, yeah, don't price it to the point where you let us talk before about the cheaper products. Don't price it so that it can get in underneath. We don't have a strong dollar at the moment, and so our buying ability is not as strong as it has been in the past. So by the time you buy it, ship it, land it, pay the duties, etc., get it into the marketplace, if you're still cheaper than the locally sourced product, well, then there's a problem with the local sellers. They're letting the other product get in underneath them. So yeah, sometimes the dollar figure is the important thing.
It's all about the competition.
Yeah, and it's all about ensuring that the consumer buys the genuine product from the right people, because that's the product for Australia. Now, for certain things that has an impact, but if it's say golf clubs or sporting goods or something, a T-shirt from an overseas marketplace to here is, because keep in mind we're 6 months behind, so a lot of A lot of the stuff that comes out of the States or, Europe comes here at the end of their season, and then we get it here. And so it's genuine and it's new, and that's when we want T-shirts as opposed to, thick jackets, because it's we're moving into our summer, they're moving into their winter. So it's very hard to stop the product coming in. A lot of Formula One and that sort of merchandise, it's overseas stuff where it's available cheaper.
Craig, before we wrap up, the rise of selling online and people buying online, which obviously in Australia really increased over COVID, and I think people are still, a lot of people buy their products online. Is there sort of a higher risk of getting a fake online, and what are the sort of things that a brand can do about it?
There is certainly a higher risk. eBay is a place where you can actually advertise a product that the photo of the product is not the product that you're going to get. So if you're selling something on, say Marketplace, and you put the photo of the product there, and when you sell it, that's the product that you get sold. But eBay allows you to use a stock image, or a photo. Let's say you got 100 lipsticks. You don't have to photograph every one of them. They let you use one image, and then they distribute from that. So that's okay for if the products are all the same. But sometimes they lift the image off client's website, and they use that, or they take a photo in a particular way of a genuine product, and then they ship out the non-genuine. When you get it, you got the option of returning it, but I got it cheap, and I'm not going to buy from him again. I've got to get on the road, and it's twice as expensive, and so people said, "Oh, I won't buy them." So buyer beware comes in with that sort of thing. So what is it the consumer's doing? Online market is a difficult market at best. It's sometimes very hard to identify the seller. Follow the money trail is what we would say. Where does the money go to? Who ultimately gets the dollars in their pocket? So you follow the money trail, but there's a lot of sellers online that you can't identify. There's sellers online running websites where the ownership of the website or the domain ownership is hidden. So you don't even know who you're dealing with. So, and that gets back to your question before, or the question about organised crime and, the people behind it all. Sometimes they're hidden for a reason.
But to give you a bit of a plug, I mean, that's the sort of thing that we see. We get to a particular point sometimes where we've looked at what seems available online about trying to identify who we're dealing with so we can write a letter, but we can't find out. That's the sort of thing that you guys have some special sauce or magic that you're able to kind of
there's no sort of black magic or special database we can go to, but we've got the skills come from having done it before as to okay, how do we work out who's behind this? I was doing something the other day for a client on an Instagram posting that they couldn't work out who it was, and they were using they're using the client's images, but there was a phone number on there. It was a French phone number, and so it's like, well, okay, well, that's one piece of information we can work on. So we Google the phone number. Turns out it's another business. We find out who the owner of business A is by looking at business B, where they're less inclined to hide who they are. So that there are ways of doing it, but that's the skill of doing this for 40 years and trying to work out who's behind all these things. But it's very hard. You want to know, not only you want to know who it is, but where are they? Because it's no good producing a legal document if I don't know where to go to serve the thing. You can try and serve via Facebook. You can try and serve. There's multiple ways you can try and get the document, post it to somebody. But in a lot of cases, if you've got a seller of a fake product, they're hidden for a reason. And they're and if you find a way to get to them, they very quickly close up that portal as well, so that the next person can't get to them. So their job is to buy the sell product, make money, and not have any problems when a brand owner comes after them and says, "Hey, you can't sell that, or you're using my imagery, or you're confusing the consumer." So,
well, Craig, that has been very fascinating. I want to finish with one question that we ask all our guests. This is a legal podcast, so if you were the Prime Minister for the day, what law would you change?
Well, I think from what we do and the way we go about doing the work we do, it's a very simple answer, and that I would give the state police the same powers that the federal police have got, the same seizure powers and the same powers to be able to stop counterfeit product being sold, because at the moment the state police, there's only two things they can do. We can ask them to assist under proceeds of crime. That's a bit hard because sometimes they say you haven't proven the crime. The other thing is we take them along on the basis of breach of peace. You got to come with us. It's going to be a rumble, and you need to come along and stand behind us. And they'll say, well, we'll just make certain that the peace is not broken, but we can't help you do any of your work. It's like, as long as you stand behind us, that's good enough. We get this impression of being authorised, but that's what I would do. I'd ask the federal police to give, and they can do it, give the state police the authority to take the action the federal police would normally take. Not that I think the state police want to run around 11 o'clock at night taking T-shirts off people selling outside Man United events. But, that's the sort of thing. That would make our job so much easier. So,
Excellent. Well, thank you, Craig, for coming on. Thank you, Kaye, for hosting with me, and it was terrific. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Legally Consumed, a consumer products podcast by the Consumer Products Law Firm. This was presented by Raph Goldenberg, Kaye Ho, and Will McMinn from CIE Legal. Our theme song is by our very own CIE Legal house band, which is comprised of Will McMinn, Andrew Marr, and Andrew Thompson.
This podcast production is in partnership with Social Star.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. For more updates and behind-the-scenes footage, head to our Instagram at CIE Legal, all one word. You can also check out our website to listen to a range of episodes and find additional free information at www.cielegal.com.au. To get in contact with CIE Legal about consumer products legal services, reach out to us on info@cielegal.com.au. Thanks again for listening to Legally Consumed, and see you all in the next episode.